Venom Let There Be Carnage is directed by Andy Serkis and stars Tom Hardy, Woody Harrelson, Naomi Harris, Michelle Williams, and among others. And in this story, it deals with the events picking up from the last film, where Eddie Brock is now, growing up his relationship with Venom from the last film, and he's doing a study on Cletus Cassidy, who's a murderer that's locked up in San Quentin prison. And if you've seen from the trailers, pretty much Woody Harrelson's character is trying to essentially break out of prison and trying to reconcile with his lost love, who's played by Naomi Harris, and essentially it, in a way, just basically has it to where, I'm not going to explain how, but essentially Cletus Cassidy ends up getting a symbiote like Eddie Brock did in the first film, that essentially turns him into the villain known as Carnage from the comic books. And Eddie Brock has to essentially stop Carnage from having to wreak havoc and everything, and at the same time he's also having to go through some more stuff that involves the Venom. Now here's a little backstory. Now, I'll admit that, when the first Venom came out, I didn't really think it was that bad. I know a lot of people didn't like the first one, and it has its faults, and it has its flaws to an extent that I will agree with, that the way they turned it out, and there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that I felt like they didn't really know what they were doing to try to really incorporate stuff into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where first they said it wasn't a part of it, then they said it did. There was a whole lot of stuff that it felt like they just weren't quite ready to where they were going with the actual universe that Sony has essentially set up with. Because now, ever since Venom came out, there's been now talks to where Sony itself is doing solo-focused projects that are basically doing Spider-Man villains from comic books and doing their own thing. Where next year we'll be getting the long-delayed Morbius, and then eventually we're getting Kraven the Hunter, and then among other things. And since I saw the first one, it got me really interested to see what they would do. Since if you've seen the post-credit scene from the first Venom, it leads into what they would do in bringing in Carnage. And I would admit, growing up, Venom has always been one of my favorite villains from the Spider-Man comics, and Carnage also as well. I only really know Carnage a little bit from the cartoon series of Spider-Man from the 90s, and when I played some of the video games that I've seen with. So I am familiar with Carnage, but I always consider him like pretty much the more like fucked up version of Venom compared to Venom himself, with the way that he's more crazier. But I still really liked Carnage as a character. And so when I heard about the casting that they were doing with Carnage, with Woody Harrelson playing him, I couldn't be more excited. And being that this was also directed by Andy Serkis, who has actually made his foray into directing films, especially a few years ago when he did the Mowgli movie on Netflix, it really got me interested in what they would really bring into the story. Well, into the next movie of Venom, and expanding on this universe that they established from the last movie. And one of the things that I kind of wish that they really would have, that I hope that they would do, was actually showcase of what a lot of Carnage can be like. Because keep in mind, I haven't really read much of the comics about Carnage, but from what I've heard is that in the comic books, Carnage himself is considered pretty much a pretty, fucked up like guy that kills people in various brutal ways. And I don't know, and from what I hear, I think in some of the comics, at least I'm guessing, is that in some of the comics that they are pretty brutal and bloody, that would make a great movie if they ever really got a chance to showcase of that in an actual hard R type of film. And so for the longest time, I always just thought that maybe after the success of the first Venom and even other Marvel properties like Deadpool and Logan, that maybe they would take the risk and actually give us an R-rated Venom movie that we always thought about. But alas, much like the first Venom that I had, that had no surprise with, they ended up going with PG-13. And what also really got me kind of a little bit on the low expectations was the fact that the movie also ran an hour and a half, and it really felt to me like we got a different movie that was released in theaters than probably what we would have gotten. But to get my upon finally seeing the film, I can say that it's got some things I'll say do improve a little bit on Venom to a small degree, but I'm going to be honest, there are some things I still prefer in the first film overall with this movie. But to get my pros out of the way, I will say Tom Hardy was great as Venom again and as Eddie Brock. I really enjoy a lot of the banter him and Venom do back and forth with how he's Venom's talking shit to him and all that, and the biggest strong point for me is the way that it grows further with Venom and Eddie Brock as the two's relationship, and I think that it was. I did actually feel attached to it. I enjoyed their chemistry together, and I really thought it had a good arc to it that I actually really thought worked for the film. That actually kind of saved it for me, and the way the movie played out. And they did also have some really laugh out loud moments, like the first Venom, that I enjoyed. Not to the extent like the first one, because I will say I laughed more in the first Venom, but there were some parts in the film that I did feel I was laughing with, and I did get a kick out of. The other biggest thing too is speaking of performances, Woody Harrelson. He was great, like I expected to play Cletus Cassidy. He was very maniacal. He played it very over the top, but he did it a great way, and I really enjoyed a lot of the way he talks and his sophisticated manner, the way he plays it off, and he has some fun. He has some great moments with him and like talking to Eddie Brock and stuff, and. In concept, there is something that I do like what they were doing with building his character up with, when they establish his backstory and where we're trying to lead to with his relationship with the girl played by Naomi Harris. I forgot the character's name, but her character. There is an idea that I do enjoy of what they could have went with, but unfortunately, that is also a con in my area because. It really falls into my cons later that they don't spend a whole lot of time with. But I still thought Woody Harrelson was great, and the Carnage himself, and this leads into my other pros, I really enjoy the visual effects, how they work with this. Much like with the first Venom, I liked how the CGI was very rendered, where it's got the very slimy look of Venom and stuff, and the CGI and effects they used for Carnage and Venom both look pretty great, as best as they could be with it. There are some points where the CGI does get spotty, like the first Venom does, but it doesn't it doesn't take me out of the film when it's on screen because it's kind of what I expect with that. And for what they show, I will admit that when we actually get to see what Carnage can do in the film, I thought it was good. It was pretty above the edge of PG-13, but not quite yet to R, but still pushes it hard just a little enough over it. But what we see with him, actually escaping the prison and stuff, and then the eventual fight that goes down with Venom and Carnage is great. I really enjoy a lot of this. By stakes, I mean I like the fact that there is some vulnerability to the character that pushes to the extreme with Venom that I liked with this. That I thought really worked in that case when they have their actual confrontation. And then I also got to appreciate the direction of Andy Serkis' direction is good too. The way the story is at a very fast pace on that level. But this is also where I kind of fall into more of my cons. Whereas much as the film is where it's very entertaining in the action department and from things that they develop with Venom alone and in concept wise what they use with Cletus Cassidy, unfortunately that boggles down with the writing. And that's where I have an issue where it felt like this really should have been a whole lot longer. 90 minutes, or at least a little above 90 minutes, to me I felt was too short for playing this story out. And it feels like there was a whole lot of chunk missing with Carnage and his relationship with, I forgot her name, but basically the girl from who's the Screech or Scream equivalent from the comics. That character, Naomi Harris's character. I felt like could have really been a whole lot more established the way they played it out. Because it really felt like there was 20 to 30 minutes that was missing from the entire film. And that really could have allowed made more with not only their story, but also more of the build-up that really enhances where the plot really dives into the third act. Because it feels like there's chunks in the second act that they really could have expanded a whole lot more on. And there's even some things that they really could have not really done much with, that they really could have cut out. Like Michelle Williams' character is back, and she really felt like she really didn't have much of a purpose in this story. There's things that are sweet, and I still like her chemistry with Tom Hardy and stuff from the first film, like this one. but it really feels like her character didn't have much of a purpose in this compared to how I felt with her in the first film. So really, you could have cut her scenes out and it really probably wouldn't have changed anything. So that was my other biggest issue. And again, going back to what they used with Carnage, I felt like it really should have showcased more of what we could do. Like, if they really wanted to go hard R and actually show a lot of the brutal stuff that we wanted to see with Carnage, that would have made even more fantastic with it. And I know ratings shouldn't matter when you're trying to tell a story and the way it plays out the movie. But that's one of my other biggest thing is that even if you just cut out just the violence and stuff, you still need probably more time to establish story and development and actually doing more world building that could set up with this. Now, granted, I will admit to, and I know I'm kind of going place, but going back to one of my other pros as far as world building, it's not so good when they don't really do things the way it flows with the story because they really don't expand a whole lot of stuff. But there are some other things that they do toward the end and throughout the film that they really put more ideas of what we can see in the future with this. And one of the biggest things that I will actually defend with the movie is, I'm not going to spoil anything, but let's say there is a post-credit scene that leads into something that I'm glad that they're actually finally going with for the future. And I can't wait to see what they do when they actually bring this into a later film. So that is one of my biggest bright spots with it, is that post-credit scene. But the rest of the film, I think, could have been a whole lot better because it just lacked a whole lot of things that while it is fun and is on a good entertaining level, it just lacks a whole lot of emphasis on what they could have done with. So with that being said, even though there's things that I will say, the only thing I can say that improved upon was some of the stuff that they flow better with, that they improved on with Eddie Brock's relationship with Venom is further explored in this that I appreciated, but that's really the one thing I can say that does more with the first film, because the rest of it was a little bit of a drop compared to the first one. But it's still not bad, it just could have been a whole lot better. And with that being said, I'm going to give the film an average Joe on the Film Freaks meter. So, for those of you who have also seen Venom Let There Be Carnage, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it and the other Venom movie as well. And thank you so much for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.